Hello my friends, stay a while and listen. It's Q here from Retro Q Gaming and I want to take you back in time. And despite going so far back in time, there was still things that we have to this day very prevalent, mainly the console wars, something that has existed through generation to generation of console over the years. From new companies rising to old companies fading into obscurity. From vicious ad campaigns to the weirdest of celebrity endorsements. From Mode 7 to blast processing, we are going to take a look through the years at the console wars. We're going to see how they played out on this side of the world, and how I persevered, how I survived, and what side I chose, and how that played out for me. Over the next couple of videos, we'll see how all this went. But for now, let's take a look at the 8th console generation. Now this one is actually the current generation, the one we're still properly in. Technically, there's a weird thing about it. There is one 9th generation console out, but realistically, it's in a very strange position. So, the 8th console generation, it has 3 platforms in here. We're looking at the Nintendo Wii U, Microsoft's Xbox One, and Sony with the PS4. I will give a little bit of a mention to the Nintendo Switch at the end of this video. Like I said, it is the actual first and only 9th generation console and is officially classified by Nintendo as a home console first with hybrid portable features. That's why it's making it into this video. But anyway, let's start with the Wii U, because let's face it, the Wii U chronologically was the very first 8th generation console that we had launch. Now this generation, much like the previous one, the 7th console generation, is very, very mundane and even more lackluster and, frankly, almost boring than any of the ones before it. So chances are, we're going to get through this pretty damn quickly. Anyway, the Wii U, Nintendo, trying to capitalize off the massive marketing and massive sales success of the Wii, decided to call their next system the Wii U. This presented many problems. Mainly because of poor marketing and poor naming schemes and lack of clarification on what the product and system actually was. Many people thought the Wii U was just an add-on. Many people also thought the Wii and the Wii U were the same thing. Hell, to this day, just a few weeks ago, at the very end of 2018, I ran into someone who thought the Wii U was just the game tablet add-on for the Wii. So what do I mean by that anyway when I say game tablet add-on? Well, the big gimmick with the Nintendo Wii U was its controller. It didn't use a standard style controller, although one of those was available, although it was pretty much gold dust. But with the Wii U, the main primary controller was actually something more akin to a tablet. It had a touchscreen in the middle, and on your left and right hand sides of the controller, you'd have, say, your D-pad, your left analog stick, your right analog stick, your face buttons, etc. Think of it as looking at a Nintendo Switch as the entire controller. And this presented a number of problems. It wasn't very ergonomic, it was awkward to use, and it had an absolutely terrible battery life because of the standard screen, coupled with the standard battery. But anyway, the Wii U, it launched at the end of 2012, a whole year head start before the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4. Now, because of a lot of the problems I've already mentioned in this video with, say, the likes of marketing, confusion, lack of clarity on what the product and all was, coupled with the fact that even being the first 8th generation console, it was only on par with the previous 7th generation consoles of the competition. Many games would run worse when ported over. The very few that were ported over. Because like every Nintendo system since the Super Nintendo, the Wii U lacked third-party support on the high-end, non-casual, non-shovelware market. The system launched with a couple of late ports of games that had previously come out on, say, Xbox 360 and PS3 several years prior, and that's basically where it stopped. The sales for the Wii U were absolutely abysmal. Sold just over 13 million units in its lifespan, which is the worst selling home console ever since the Sega Dreamcast. And even then, there's not much of a difference in between there. But anyway, let's take a second to look at what the Wii U could do and what we did with the Wii U here. Well, as you'd expect, many launch titles and many first-party titles from Nintendo would try to capitalize and make use and shoehorn in the touchscreen. I know personally, when I bought my Wii U, about a month after launch, I picked up Zombie U. And believe it or not, while the game is okay, it actually utilizes the touchscreen in a really good way, and it utilizes the controller in a really good way. But the big problem I came across with the Wii U was probably the same as everyone else. There was basically nothing to play on it. Almost immediately, the Wii U became a first party and exclusive machine to me, much like almost every Nintendo system since the Super Nintendo. The only games you would buy on the Wii U were either remasters of old Nintendo games, brand new Nintendo games, or the very, very, very few third-party exclusives. And the big problem with those was that when you look at, say, the third-party exclusives, there was very few companies that wanted to develop games for the Wii U because of its commercial failure. It just wasn't worth the company's time to develop a game over a year, year and a half, 2 years, whatever it is, to put them out on an absolutely irrelevant console. It was even arguably the same with Nintendo. Nintendo put out what felt like very, very few exclusive first-party games on the Wii U. It felt like they were all being delayed, possibly even held back in secret, or them just not even bothering because they knew it wasn't worth their time. Hell, look at Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. The game received almost 2 years of delays just so it could launch simultaneously on the Wii U and the Switch, because they knew no one was going to go out and buy a bunch of Wii U's after 5 years of failure just to play Zelda. So of course, they didn't want to repeat those mistakes and launched it on the Switch, where it actually did well. Now, of course, that's not to say that there weren't any quality games on the system. There were definitely some good quality games on the Wii U. Again, first party, remasters, or third party exclusives. You have games like Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Super Mario 3D World, Tokyo Mirage Sessions FE, to name but a few. So yes, there were absolutely still some good quality games on the system. Very, very few and far between, but they did exist. An extra handy feature with the Wii U was actually its ability to natively play Wii games backwards compatible. You could actually insert the discs and it would go into Wii mode. This also had an added benefit because you could actually transfer over your account and all the things linked to it from your Wii onto your Wii U, like for example virtual console purchases, and they could still be used that way. You could use your existing controllers, your Wii waggle motes and whatnot, and all types of peripherals that would connect into it. So that came in really handy. However, having said all that, I still found very, very, very little use for my Wii U. Just like the Wii before it, I would frequently find myself playing my Wii U once a year, maybe once every couple of months for about an hour when you take into the release of virtual console games directly onto the Wii U. Because the Wii U also had a virtual console. It was handled extremely poorly. Very few companies wanted to actually bother putting their games on there and licensing their games out to it because they just knew it wasn't going to sell because of the commercial failure of the Wii U. And unlike what Nintendo had done beforehand with the Wii and the virtual console, they would actually drip feed games onto the Wii U virtual console, where you would get maybe one game a week and you'd only get one game worth buying maybe every 2 to 3 months. It was very, very disheartening. That's really it. That's really all there is to say with the Wii U. Its almost immediate lack of third-party support, and even its patchy at best first-party Nintendo support, as well as the marketing, the mixed messages, everything about it was just an absolute disaster. Now, having said all that, we'll end out our little Wii U section here with an anecdote, and I'm kind of struggling to run into an anecdote for the Wii U. The closest thing I can do to having an anecdote for the Wii U is just to give you an example of how poor the battery is in the actual tablet controller. Less than a week before Tokyo Mirage Sessions FE came out, I got my Wii U gamepad out of the drawer. Obviously it was covered in dust because I hadn't used it in probably about a year, so naturally the battery was completely flat. I want to say this was a Sunday night and the game released on a Friday, so it was about 5 days. I plugged it in, I charged it up the entire way. You'd usually get a maximum of about 3 hours lifespan out of that battery, by the way. And I put it back in the drawer. A couple of days pass and I finally get my copy of Tokyo Mirage Sessions. I go to boot the game up, and of course, because it's such a low quality product with a terrible battery, it's already completely dissipated in less than a week. I don't think I've ever seen another single product in existence that died that fast. Even from back in the 80s and 90s. Stuff like that with batteries do not die that fast. Anyway, that's it for the Nintendo Wii U and its almost legendary failure. Let's move on to what's next. The Xbox One. And there's not really much to say about the Xbox One. As I mentioned already, the Xbox One and PS4 are very, very similar. But we'll get into the nitty gritty details, even though there aren't really that many. Like I said already, this whole generation is very boring, very mundane, and completely devoid of any innovation or anything along those lines. So when it actually came out, the Xbox One was heavily questioned, and that's putting it lightly, because originally when this was announced, the Xbox One was basically an always online platform. Now I say basically because you didn't 100% need to be connected all the time, but you did need to be connected at least once every 24 hours so you could keep using your games and whatnot. Pre-owned games were basically going to be a thing of the past, and it would work similar to like Steam or whatever. You'd buy a game, it would link to your account forever, and that's it. And understandably, a lot of people weren't happy about that. This policy, of course, was massively criticised before launch, and hell, there was only about a 6-month gap between announcement and actual launch. So that's a pretty big deal if they actually went and did that in that small time frame so close to launch. But some other very big problems with the Xbox One were not only the price, but also what you got for it. After the success of Kinect on the Xbox 360, Microsoft offered Kinect with Xbox One. You could not buy an Xbox One without Kinect at first. And yes, of course, the upgraded version of Xbox One's Kinect instead of the 360 version was naturally far more advanced and impressive. It still had problems, and of course, not everyone wanted it either, but you were forced to pay for it because the console wasn't available without it. And in order to factor in the price of Kinect and the cost of Kinect, as well as kind of keep the price down, they actually had to downgrade some of the specs in the console itself. So while it does run very similarly to the PS4, the Xbox One was actually less powerful, so it was technically inferior. This brought out many types of problems over the next, well, couple of years, and still going at this point. Xbox One games either look inferior, run inferior, or both to the PlayStation counterparts when you look at multiplats. A game on an Xbox One might be 900p 30 frames per second. On PlayStation 4 it might be 1080p 30 frames per second. Or they both might be 1080p, but the frame rate might be a little bit better on the PS4. Or the graphics and visuals might be a little bit better on the PS4. And of course, since we're talking about Xbox One, there is one very glaring issue we need to talk about, because it's arguably the biggest issue. Now, of course, while Microsoft rectified some of their initial problems by down the line offering versions of Xbox One without Kinect, and now they've completely stopped selling Kinect at all, you can't even buy it directly from Microsoft themselves anymore, let alone get it bundled with a console, that problem is gone. The always online DRM check-in thing, that's gone. That went before launch. The Xbox One being underpowered compared to the PS4, this has obviously been rectified by the Xbox One X, which we'll talk about a little bit in detail now in a minute. But Microsoft's biggest problem this generation, that's right, all of these problems I've just listed a minute ago are not even their biggest problems. Microsoft's biggest problem this generation is the games, or rather, the lack of games. There are basically no compelling reasons to buy an Xbox One, or any member of the Xbox One family, that is Xbox One, Xbox One S, or Xbox One X, if you don't have a serious investment in the first-party IPs. Let me give you an example. Microsoft have been putting out very few first-party games, and the ones they do put out lately are all very multiplayer, remonetizable focused games, and are of questionable quality at best. Let me give you an example. I got my Xbox One on day one, got a midnight launch. I bought one game that day, one game that night I should say. I bought Dead Rising 3. I'm a big fan of the Dead Rising series, as I'm sure many of you already know. But Dead Rising 3 was okay. It's not as good as Dead Rising 1 or 2. It's a very average and mediocre game. It's not bad, it's just kind of average, which was a big step back from Dead Rising 1 and Dead Rising 2. But overall, the game launched very buggy and broken, not to mention all the DLCs launched very buggy and broken. So let me paint this picture. November 2013, I get my Xbox One and I get Dead Rising 3. The next Xbox One game I bought was the Master Chief Collection a year later, in 2014. The next Xbox One game I bought after that was Gears of War Ultimate Edition, almost an entire year later. A few months later I bought Halo 5, a couple of months after that Quantum Break, and then relatively recently LA Noire Remastered. And that's it, that's my entire library of Xbox One games. Almost all the first-party games that Microsoft has put out since 2015 have been of very questionable quality. In fact, all of them actually come to PC on the same day as their Xbox One counterpart. So I can buy a game digitally on my PC, like say Gears of War 4, Gears of War 5, Halo Wars 2, should I be inclined to play it, which I won't be, Crackdown 3, whatever it is, I have no need to buy these games on Xbox One. So between the very sparse amount of titles that they do put out first party, a lot of them are mediocre at best, and the rest I don't even need to buy on Xbox One. So that just gives you a bit of an example of how many issues there are when it comes to Xbox One. Sure, it gets almost all of the third-party support. Not all of it, but the majority of it. You will, of course, have all your big-name games. You'll get your Assassin's Creed, you'll get your Call of Duty, you'll get your Battlefield, you'll get your FIFA, you'll get your Madden. You get all the big-name third-party games. At least the mainstream ones anyway. But therein lies the problem. If you have a choice to buy a console in the form of the Xbox One or PS4, when you look at what the Xbox One offers, it's questionable first-party support. The majority of third-party support, although it is the smaller of the two when it comes to the catalogue of support, and you will get games that run inferior and look inferior, even if it is only slightly, to the rival platform. And speaking of being inferior to the other platform on a technical level, the Xbox One launched €100 more expensive. That's right, 25% more expensive than the PS4 when that launched. Now real quick, we'll move on to the Xbox One X. This part will be very, very short because there's not really much to talk about when it comes to it. The Xbox One X is a revised version of the Xbox One. It has a significantly more powerful GPU, granted it's only mid-range by current PC hardware standards, but is significantly better than what was in the launch PS4 and launch Xbox One, because they actually use the same GPU. However, because they can't change things too much, they actually have to use a very slightly upgraded version of the CPU in these consoles, which is absolutely woefully underpowered and is an absolute mindfuck that they ever decided to use this for game development in any way, shape or form. It is literally that bad. So when you look at the Xbox One X, sure, you do get a bunch of games from first-party support with proper upgrades and whatnot. You have games like the Master Chief Collection, Halo 5, etc., and they will run at 4K 60 frames per second. Highly optimized games developed in-house specifically for that hardware. Gears of War 4, for example, on Xbox One X, you have a choice of max settings 4K 30 frames per second or 1080p 60, or at least tries to keep 60, with not max settings. The Xbox One X support from third-party developers is kind of questionable. It feels like they still focus on the PS4 Pro version a little bit more than the X because, well, they're probably going to get the majority of their sales on the PS4. However, of course, that's not always the case. There are some games out there that will look and run better, if not both, on the Xbox One X compared to the PS4 Pro. But again, it's down to the games. There's no point in having the best, most powerful console in the world if you've got nothing to play on it. And as a comparison, I bought an Xbox One X at launch. Was a little bit annoyed with myself simply because I only really played 2 games on it. Everything else I can still buy on my PC and play better than an Xbox One X will ever play them. So it was really only a Halo box for me. I had Halo the Master Chief Collection and Halo 5 and that was pretty much it. It broke about a month and a half later anyway, and I got my refund and I never went back. I'll probably buy another one just for streaming purposes and whatnot, because at least that way it will give me a nice easy access to, say, the Master Chief Collection, Halo 5, and of course backwards compatibility for whatever I want to play that's actually on there. Because that was a nice addition. Now we'll round out the Xbox One section with a little bit of an anecdote, as we always do. So earlier on in this video you might recall how I was down talking Kinect and how I was not very happy with Xbox Kinect. Well, let me give you the perfect example. About a week after Xbox One actually launched, I was playing Dead Rising 3. Now, there are no proper motion controls in the Xbox One controller, so all the motion controls were done via Kinect, and it would work from there. So, when you had Xbox Kinect turned on, and you were playing Dead Rising 3, when you got grabbed by a zombie, you actually needed to shake the controller to get the zombie to break the grip. Instead of previous games, or when you turned the Kinect off, you only had to press a button. Now my problem with this was Kinect was not picking up my motion. Kinect was not picking up the controller I was shaking. I was almost max level, had almost maxed health. I had full health that I actually had at the time. And I lost about 8, 9, 10 blocks of health because it would not pick up my controller movement. To this day, it remains the only time I've ever died in Dead Rising 3. Needless to say, once I died that time, I instantly paused the game, quit out, went back to the dashboard, disabled Kinect, and I have never re-enabled it. So that says it all. Anyway, let's move on to the next one, which we have the PS4 and the PS4 Pro. So with the PS4 and the PS4 Pro, there's not much to talk about because it's basically all we've already covered in the Xbox One section. Hardware, very, very similar. Even the likes of the PS4 Pro, it's still very similar. It's more powerful than the PS4 and Xbox One, but it's not as powerful as the Xbox One X. But let's touch on the PS4 and its positives, or at least the positives for me and how it worked over here. The main things I was looking at when I was buying a PS4, I looked at it more as an investment. There was no games I actually wanted out at the time of launch. However, I won't buy a console without something to play, so I bought Killzone Shadowfall as the bundle with my PS4. I tend to buy these things early as an early adopter, and I look at them as an investment because I could buy it now and then they'll come in useful down the line when all these games actually launch for me to play. Sure, you could say I could wait and then probably get a cheaper or better bundle or an upgrade or whatever it is whenever I actually should buy it. But nah fam, that ain't me. So just like the Xbox One, when I first bought my PS4, I probably spent about a week going hard into Killzone Shadowfall, got every single player trophy, didn't touch the multiplayer. And just like my Xbox One, it became dormant for months if not years at a time. However, over time, that actually changed. More and more companies were developing games for the modern era, including first and third party games. Sony of course gets a lot of praise for their first party games. Many of them are pretty high quality, even if a lot of them don't appeal to myself. But I would say arguably Sony has more first party games and first party studios that I am interested in. And when you couple that with games that would be from third parties that were exclusive to PlayStation, like for example Persona 5 is only on the PS3 and PS4, and the fact that if you bought console exclusive games, like for example Destiny 1, not on PC, it was only on Xbox One and PS4 of this generation, it would run and look a little bit better on the PS4. So any games where PC was ruled out, I would get them on PS4. Another thing that would factor into all of this is my friend. We were all going into this generation thinking, what are we going to play on? We were most likely actually planning on Xbox One as our main platform. But then as time went by, it was revealed that the games would look a little bit worse, would run a little bit worse, whatever it is on the Xbox One. So we started deciding to buy them on PS4 and play on there. Now we had all got Xbox Live memberships at that point because Xbox Live and Xbox 360 were obviously fairly heavily used for us. And with Sony now charging for the PlayStation Network on the PS4, we had to see how it went. So that was something to factor in. However, we did use the PS4 as our main multiplayer platform of this generation, at least for the console side of it. But as a comparison, as time went by, when you look at the third-party exclusive games that would come to PlayStation but not onto Xbox or PC, naturally, I would have to buy them on PlayStation. And hell, to this day, at the end of January 2019, I may only have about 25 to 30 PS4 games, but that's several times my library of Xbox One games. Use that as a comparison. There's not much to talk about with the PS4 Pro, as I've always said. Everything that runs on PS4 will run on here. It will run a little bit better and look a little bit better than the base consoles, even if it doesn't look up to Xbox One X. However, having said that, it does look like a lot of developers would spend a little bit more time optimizing and running stuff a little bit better for the PS4 Pro because they'll get a significant more amount of sales on the PlayStation family rather than the Xbox family. Now it's anecdote time because we're done with the PS4 here. So let me give you my anecdote. I love using this one. Mainly because everyone knows I hate Destiny. I hate it so much. Destiny is a terrible game, terrible games at this point, and it's a terrible franchise made by a once legendary studio who is now a shell of their former self. So when Destiny was coming out, there was a closed alpha that you could sign up for. I didn't bother signing up for it. I didn't care that much. But then a few weeks later, there was a free beta, and I was like, you know what? I'll play that. It's easy. I can just download it. I don't have to register or get codes, hope I'm picked, anything like that. So I downloaded that, I started playing it and whatnot, and I realized this is one of the worst, most boring and bland, poorly designed games I've ever played. And I was wondering, how the hell is this as popular and hyped as it's about to be? And at the time I was thinking, okay, I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. Even though this is absolutely terrible, it'll probably be a little bit better when I'm playing with my friends. But then it dawned on me, Destiny is trying to be Borderlands and Borderlands 2. Just like all these other games that are trying to do the same thing. The Division, Anthem, Destiny, they're all trying to replicate what Borderlands can do, and none of them have done it successfully. At this point, I had never played Borderlands 2 despite owning it for several years on Steam. Any of you PC gamers out there can probably empathize with my situation. We all know when a Steam sale hits, even if it's something you probably think you'll never play, what's €3 to buy a game, am I right? Anyway, because Destiny was so bad and I knew it was trying to emulate Borderlands, I told myself, you know what, I'm gonna go and see what all the hype for Borderlands is. Went to my computer, not this one, but my old one at the time, which is still more powerful than the consoles, and I installed Borderlands and the Season Pass content, whatever DLCs and stuff I had with it. Within 10 minutes I absolutely loved Borderlands and I put like 60 hours into the game that week alone. Borderlands 2 is amazing, and the best thing, the only possible positive thing I can ever say has come from Destiny, is that it got me to try and absolutely fall in love with Borderlands 2. I can't wait till Borderlands 3 comes out. My channel will inadvertently change into a Borderlands 3 channel for a week or two, because I just can't wait. Anyway, I will say one or two little words about the Nintendo Switch just before we finish the video, even though it is technically a 9th generation console. So the Nintendo Switch, which is in a really weird situation, which marks the first time Nintendo have actually done any type of positive sales since the casual Wii and the Super Nintendo, although it seems to only be in a really weird situation. The Nintendo Switch has been out for almost 2 years, and it's already relegated itself to, well, pretty much any Nintendo platform since the Super Nintendo. In year 1 they went big as to avoid some, let's say, Wii U era mistakes where they had no games by launching Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild on launch day of course, and Super Mario Odyssey later that year. A fantastic game by the way, both of them actually, but Mario is a little bit better. However, because the console is woefully underpowered because they had to factor in the whole portability side of it as well, even though it is first and foremost a home console as is according to Nintendo, the vast majority of third-party support is absent from the Nintendo Switch. The games can physically not run on it, even with heavy downgrades, so companies don't even bother porting their games on it because it's just not worth it because they can't really do it. I mean, who wants to play something like, say, Wolfenstein 2 at 360p? With lower than lowest quality settings at 22 frames per second. And that's the biggest problem with this, because of the technological limitations of releasing a 9th gen console which is only slightly more powerful than everyone else's 7th generation consoles. You can see why the Nintendo Switch has easily only become almost instantly a first party only machine, and of course the very rare third party exclusive. As it currently stands at the moment, I have 6 Nintendo Switch games. I plan to add 2 or 3 of them this year, which is pretty much all the Nintendo Switch games coming out this year, because 2019 is looking to be almost as dry as Nintendo's 2018, when I didn't buy a single game for the console. You can stuff your portability because it does nothing to advance modern era gaming and modern console from a technological standpoint and a gaming standpoint. There's not much to say about the Switch other than that. So here we are at the end of the video. I'm not going to bother giving an anecdote for the Switch because lol Switch, but I think it's pretty apparent to all of you out there how this generation played out for me. When you look at the epic failure of the Wii U, granted it had some decent games, you look at the moderate failure of the Xbox One, and you look at the complete dominance of the PS4, not to mention the amount of time I've spent playing each of the consoles, and the amount of games I own on the consoles. It's easy to say and it's easy to see that PS4 was my go-to for this generation. Now of course it's not going to come close, just like any of the previous generations, to my PCs of the time. But hey, we're talking about consoles in this video. So yes, the PS4 was how I stuck with this generation over here. And that's how we got forward, and that's how we won this whole situation. Who knows how the next generation is going to be with the Xbox 2 and the PS5. I'm sure Microsoft are going to learn from their mistakes and possibly do things right. Hopefully at least anyway, because it would be a shame for any of these companies to go away. Even if Microsoft have been making some massive fuck-ups for this entire generation, competition breeds innovation. Because of Sony winning and Microsoft losing, Microsoft have actually came up with a couple of decent initiatives during this generation. While it's not for me, Game Pass is one of them. They've even added backwards compatibility to Xbox 360 and OG Xbox games. All as extra initiatives to try add more incentive to the console, whereas Sony have done basically nothing. And I can understand that, they don't need to. They're so far ahead, they have so many games, so many users, so many sales, that they don't need to do anything. Clearly what they're doing is enough. So next time round, we'll see how it goes. Because in the 7th generation, this was reversed. Sony were failing massively, and they had to do some policies, they had to do some initiatives, they had to make a comeback. So we'll see if that works in the next generation. So this story might be all too familiar with yourselves, it might be something that you can relate to if you live here in Europe, or it might be something completely different no matter where you live in the world. Who knows, maybe a few years from now I'll have to make one of these about the 9th generation. Until then, I want to thank everyone for watching, peace out, and we'll see In a few years, how I have to make a video about this, and how I survived the upcoming and eventual and possibly inevitable 9th generation of consoles.